Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace be upon you all. It is truly a pleasure and honor to welcome you all here on behalf of the MSA, the Muslim Students Association, and AMAC, the American Muslim Advisory Council. Before we begin, I want to take a brief moment just to express my gratitude to you all. It's really such an amazing experience, and it's encouraging to see you all here to support us. As we go through the program, inshallah, we're going to start off with Zubair, one of our members from MSA, who's going to give a brief recitation from the Quran, our holy text. And so he'll recite the Quran, and he'll recite 3 verses in Arabic, and then he'll give the English translation. And then we'll proceed with the program. So please help me in welcoming Zubair.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اجتنبوا كثيرا من الظن إن بعض الظن إثم ولا تجسسوا ولا يغتب بعضكم بعضا أيحب أحدكم أن يأكل لحم أخيه ميتا فكرهتموه واتقوا الله إن الله تواب رحيم يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا إن أكرمكم عند الله أتقاكم إن الله عليم خبير قالت الأعراب آمنا قل لم تؤمنوا ولكن قولوا أسلمنا ولما يدخل الإيمان في قلوبكم وإن تطيعوا الله ورسوله لا يلتكم من أعمالكم شيئا إن الله غفور رحيم. O you who have believed, let not a people ridicule another people. Perhaps they may be better than you. Nor let women ridicule other women. Perhaps they may be better than them. And do not insult one another, and do not call one another by offensive nicknames. Wretched is the one who is disobedient after one's faith. And whoever does not repent, then it is those who are wrongdoers. O you who have believed, avoid much negative assumption. Indeed, some assumption is sin. And do not spy on one another or backbite each other. Would one of you like to eat the flesh of his brother's meat when he's dead? You would detest it, and fear Allah. Indeed, Allah is accepting of repentance and mercy. O mankind, indeed we have created you from a single male and female, and made you peoples and tribes, that you may get to know one another. Indeed, the most noble of you inside of Allah is the most righteous of you. Indeed, Allah is knowing and most acquainted. Thank you.
Thank you, Zubair. And so to start, I'd like to introduce to you Brother Paul Galloway. Paul is the Executive Director of AMAC, the American Muslim Advisory Council, and is a husband, a father of 4, a Nashvilleian by way of Texas, a graduate of the FBI Citizens Academy and a Muslim community leader, with nearly 15 years of professional nonprofit experience, working with law enforcement and the news media and interfaith community. Please help me in welcoming Brother Paul Galloway.
We're going to do a quick exercise. Everybody, I want you to repeat after me. Say Oscar. Oscar Mayer. Oscar Mayer Bacon. Now say Assalamu alaikum. We don't eat pork. We don't necessarily hate pigs, but it's a good way to get your tongue ready for it. That's a very ancient way of saying howdy, or a prayer for all of you that may you be at such peace that you have the type of security and fulfillment that God has. Because when you say salam, which is the root word of assalamu alaikum, it's one of the attributes of God, and we're wishing it upon you. Without very much pomp and circumstance, I want to introduce someone that you should all know. Her name is Zulfat. Please stand up. Zulfat is the outgoing chair of the American Muslim Advisory Council. She was recently inducted into the Tennessee Women's Hall of Fame.
Also received the Director's Award for Community Service from the FBI with Director James Comey in Washington, D.C. And I'm calling her today to present two what might look like conflicting awards, because one's a civil libertarian and one is a law enforcement leader, but she's presenting two Lifetime Achievement Awards from people who have made Nashville a better city. So please welcome Zulfat, and she will introduce the awards.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. I want to thank you all for being here with us again, just to reiterate what everybody's saying. And it's my pleasure to introduce our first honoree. This is someone that I consider a personal friend, and she's been a friend of our community. To take you all back, in 2010, the famous anti-Sharia bill, when it was proposed in the legislature, we had to go in and Rashid is very busy. So we know that. That is something that he needs to do and has to do, and so we forgive him. When we had to testify in Congress and to make our case about how Sharia law is an infringement on our rights, how Sharia law is not what the media and everyone said it is, and how actually stopping Sharia law in Tennessee will actually stop us from performing our basic duties as Muslims. So in order to be able to do that, we had to select a few people to testify before Congress, before our state legislators. And this lady was one of them. And she spoke very passionately on our behalf. We also had a press conference, and she's been with us for as long as I can think of. I also remember an incident where one of us was pulled over in one of the counties, neighboring counties, and she had tickets. And when they wanted to photograph her, they made her take off her hijab. And she was telling them they did not have to, but they did not believe her. So we call him Hedy. Anytime we have any civil rights infringements, we call Hedy. Anytime somebody says something they're not supposed to say, we call Hedy. And so she's been there for us, guiding us, being with us, being a friend of our community, and also doing all that she does. Hedy is the executive director of ACLU. But to a lot of us, she's a friend, and so it is my honor on behalf of the American Muslim Advisory Council, as well as the Tennessee Muslim community, to give this award, Lifetime Achievement, to Ms. Hedy Wembeck.
I'm honored to be here, and also to be partners with Sylvette and so many of you. You know, ACLU is about fairness and equal treatment and equal protection, and that's what we do day in and day out in this state and across the country. But having partners like AMAC and many of you in this room
make this work, it just keeps me going. So I actually think I'm too young to get a Lifetime Achievement Award, but I do appreciate it, and it really does mean a lot to me. So thank you, and thank all of you who are standing up and joining with us to protect our freedoms.
It is a Lifetime Achievement Award, not because she's retiring or because she's too old, because we've learned over the years to stand on our own. Due to that anti-Sharia bill, out of that came AMAC and ACO. And what the Muslim community has been able to do over the years is now be the voice of the Muslim community. Have her speak on behalf of ourselves, have us make those relationships, have us do the work that will ensure our civil liberties. So we still call Hedy as a friend, and she is always there, but we now know some of the things because she trained us so well. So that's why we're giving that, and we acknowledge that. And in the work that we do, as we continue to fight for civil liberties, not just for the Muslim communities, but all religious communities, that's what we stand for, to make sure that it doesn't have to be laws pertaining to Muslims, but any religious infraction that we make sure that we're there. Our community has faced a lot of things, but in the work that we do, we have found a lot of partnership on the way. I want to tell you about a lot of incidences that have happened in Nashville. some mosques were vandalized. You all know about Mufizbur and all of that. Something that I always tell everybody is that what you may not see in the media, or you may not hear about, is that when the perpetrators were caught and when they're prosecuted, or when the United States Justice Department said the mosque could be built, is because of our law enforcement. And so over the years, we've had a great partnership in Chief Henderson, who is the Chief of Police for Davidson and Nashville. And he's opened his doors to us. He's always there when we call him. We hold meetings with him, and anytime we call him, he's always there. I remember the last meeting we had, he's even saying that we can come for ride-alongs, and his office is always open. So we cannot do what we do without having that partnership. And it means a lot to us. That is one that has been there and will continue to be there for us. So it's my honor to introduce our next honoree, Chief Steve Anderson.
So every time I stand in a position like this, I feel a little awkward because I'm just one member of our 1,900 employees. And we have so many good people out there on the street doing the work every day. Example here, Commander Loki, Sergeant Jones, Officer Follett, the other Sergeant Jones is outside. It's my way of saying it, they make me look good. I couldn't do this without them, and I think you know that when you go out there on the street, the officers you meet are a reflection of what we want them to be. So we thank you for your cooperation with us as we attempt to keep Nashville safe, and most of all, I thank the officers out there on the street that's doing that job every day. Thank you.
At this point, I would like to invite the officers as well as some of our community leaders to join me up here while we take a group pictures with our honorees.
You guys have to be in the middle, up in the front, and if you can give it to him. Okay, I'll go get him. Yes, ma'am. Everyone say falafel.
It's a lifetime achievement award, not because of the years in my life, but the amount of life in my years. I would like to, thank you so much, Chief. I'd like to do just a couple of housekeeping things very quickly, and I'd also like to give another round of applause to the MSA, who are our hosts tonight. If you registered online, you have a chance. We have 20 of these T-shirts by a group called Extremely Muslim. And the T-shirts is what Islam taught me, and it says words like peace, patience, perseverance. And 20 of these were donated for free, and we'll be doing a raffle based on the online registrations. Because Islam teaches mercy, if you came and you didn't raffle, and you have a smart device, it is amac4tn.eventbrite.com. And if you register between now and the end of Pat's speech, you'll have a chance at winning one of the shirts. It's my pleasure to introduce two of my friends tonight that have flown all the way from Houston, Texas to spend the evening with you. The first speaker is one of my close friends, my teacher, my sheikh, and one of my advisors. His name is Shaykh Waleed Basyouni. Shaykh Basyouni is a world-renowned Islamic scholar. He was trained in Saudi Arabia. He got his master's in Islamic Sciences at Al-Imam University in Riyadh, which in a lot of ways is like the Harvard of the Saudi theological schools. He has to do practical judgments and rulings before he can actually get his degree, where other degrees is just theory, and then they give you your degree. And Shaykh Waleed got his PhD in theology here in the United States.
He operates an education institute called the Al-Maghrib Institute, which teaches on-site classes in 9 countries. I know the student body population is growing exponentially, but over 30,000 students. 150,000, so that's 5 years ago I had 30,000. 150,000 students have been taught, and Shaykh Waleed has been personally targeted by Daesh, the group otherwise known as the Islamic State, ISIL, or ISIS, for execution because he is so effective at destroying the way they pervert our faith. He has first-hand experience doing interventions with misguided teens and is very sought after across the country. I'd actually like to just bring him up without any more pomp and circumstances. I'm probably embarrassing him, but he will give us a 20-minute presentation, which will be followed by an FBI agent, retired, and then the Q&A session. Shaykh Waleed.
Assalamu alaikum. How are you guys doing? Okay. Do I need to put this one too? Okay. Good. Thank you. As you heard my friend Paul telling you about me, one day in the morning I got a phone call from a friend of mine telling me, by the way, Waleed, your name is in Dabiq magazine, which is published by ISIS. And I'm not prescribed to the magazine, so I don't know what they published. So he told me, your name is in the hit list. Basically, they mentioned several names, and your name one of them, that they encouraging any one of their followers in the United States to take your life, to kill you. And they said that this is one of the most, the best deeds you can do to please God is to kill those infidels. The 12 of us, they said that killing people like myself will be more beneficial and more beloved to God than killing a non-Muslims. Because for them, I am a person who, worse than just a non-Muslim. So really the news wasn't new to me because I heard some threats like that before, long time ago, and the type of work that I do and the discussions that I had with many people in my life. But to publish it in the language it was used was kind of surprising to me. And I asked him to forward me a copy from magazine, and it was a problem. What if I have it? What if the FBI watching it? You know? So I decided to go to some right-wing website. They publish their magazine every month, or they follow it, and then found the article. But really a big question came to me that day, and I was asking myself, why? Why these 12 people or 13 people that they targeted from the United States and some others from Europe as well? I know it's the type of works that we do that definitely we're hurting them. We became an obstacle for them to recruit more young people to join them and to accept their message. And it's not about ISIS. My work in my life was not even about this particular group. It's about the whole entire, I call it the jihadi movements in modern days. This is, I think, ISIS can come in many different forms, many different names. We had Al-Qaeda, we have ISIS. We will have many other names comes in the future as well, unfortunately. So I decided to talk to you about what's the future our children inherit. And there's many areas that I can talk about in this subject, but I will focus on specific areas that I want to share it with you today. As we all know, our tumultuous world today currently presents in my opinion, two clashing visions of the world our children are set to inherit. The first vision is an identity crisis that's searching for an absolute utopian vision of idealized past. Ends justifying the means, for my opinion, is a very clear characteristic of this camp. And on the other hand, you have another vision for the world, which works to build cross-identity cooperation for the greater good. And that will basically ensure a good future for generations to come. And these two different vision for the world. That there is people who will see the world has to polarize to two camps, and these two camps, one of them has to win the battle. And the other ones say that no, there is no need for us to be polarized this way. We can work together across cultures, across multi-religions and people with no religions. We can coexist together and work for the best interest for all of us. And these two different visions, and unfortunately the one who prescribed to the first one is not only ISIS. There is a lot of people who have this idea and this way of thinking, realizing that or not realizing that. So if I look to us here specifically in America, look at demography, how things will change in future, how our children, how America will be in the future looks like, and how people basically paint this picture in a different way. If demography is destiny, then what does the U.S. futures look like? Some of you might be familiar with Washington, D.C. based institute called Brookings Institute, and their senior fellow, William Frey. He has a lot of work in this area. He has a book, I really think it's a very good book to read. It's called Diversity Explosion, How New Racial Demographics Are Remaking America. In his book, he discussed this issue, and I would like to share with you just a 2-minute video. It's basically the key findings from his book. So I'll play it for you. I guess.
The U.S. is in the midst of a huge demographic change, comparable to when the baby boom transformed our country in the late 20th century. In my book, Diversity Explosion, I write about how this time the demographic force is the growth of new minorities, especially Hispanics, Asians, and multiracial Americans. They will make a similar impact on the U.S., its society, economy, and politics. This minority growth is occurring just in time to counter the slow growth and aging of the nation's white population. Most of this increase isn't happening because of immigration. It's happening from the bottom up due to growth of U.S.-born minorities. This growth will revitalize our nation's youth and labor force and spread the melting pot to new parts of the country, facilitating minority assimilation at a time when the economy is increasingly globalized. Minorities, particularly Hispanics and Asians, are dispersing throughout the country. Minority populations aren't just growing from within, they're blending. Multiracial marriages in the middle of the last century were less than 1% of the population. Today they comprise nearly 10% of all marriages, and more than 15% of all new marriages are multiracial. These shifts have not only cultural implications, but political ones. One particularly salient example is that minorities overwhelmingly vote Democratic. This trend appears only to be increasing and will undoubtedly reshape politics in America. This diversity explosion will alter all aspects of society, politically, economically, and culturally. The United States is on the cusp of great change toward new national demographic transformation in the 21st century.
So how we go back to our, yes. So Muslim community are demographically are a very diverse community. As a matter of fact, Research Institute saying that American Muslim community is one of the most diverse faith community that we have in America. Often we think of the Muslim community in the way that is painted to us as what's happening overseas. But reality in America is quite a bit different. As you can see from the study that's done by Gallup polls, America's Muslims are literally the most racially and ethnically diverse faith-based community in our country. White and African Americans, Hispanic, Asians, Middle Eastern, Arabs, and so forth. And so many others are well represented as well. One thing about the Muslim community, though, it's interesting to know that Muslims' households help close the gender income gap. As you all know, our nation has a long struggle with closing a gender income gap between men and women. According to Gallup's research, American Muslims have successfully were able to closing that gender income gap more than any other faith-based community in the United States. I think the main reason for that is because so many of Muslims female have very high education compared to many other faith-based communities. One thing also we note, Christians describe themselves in the Religion Research Institute, the rise of America's unaffiliated population has come most significantly from younger white Americans who have previously in the past would identify themselves as Christians, but now they identify themselves as unaffiliated or not necessarily affiliated with religion. Good news, though. Also, researchers found that across the board, in all Christian denominations in the United States of America, we found that Christians in America became more diverse way than before in every single denomination. And basically, and that's, as it is very good news for America, it's very good news for American Christians, very good news for other communities as well. Because I do believe if our country became more diverse, more accepting the differences between the cultures and more racial and ethnic diverse, that basically will make our country, basically we're missing our nation's racial and ethnic tension and promoting social harmony in our society. Obviously, also an interesting researcher found that the unaffiliated rise, the number of people who prescribe themselves to other minority faith groups are growing in the United States. So what's the future of global religion identity look like? According to the Pew Research Center, and they did this research in 2010, that's why you will find the numbers, started from 2010, predicting how it's going to be in 2050. You will see that if a journey around the globe, we found that the world of 2050 is going to be significantly different than what it is in 2010. Over the next 4 decades, major transition will happen across the globe as Muslim population grow and a lot of the Christian population will decrease. In 2050, still Christians population will take a lead. It's a very small percentage, and the 31% over 30% to Muslim population. And that, make them can catch up because Christianity been for the last 6 centuries taking the lead over all other religions. Global growth of Muslim is double or 2 times more than the average rate of the growth of any other community in the world. By looking at or drilling down deeper into these Pew Research Centers, we see that by 2050, basically the rate of the growth of Christians in the world will maintain in about 35%, while the Muslims' growth will be 73%. That's twice the global average rate. Today, you might ask question, why is that? Why this is happening? Is it due to the converting people, or what is the reason for that? Actually, if you look at the research details, it's not about converting or people accepting Islam, not accepting Islam. The main reason for this change in demographic, it is because the Muslim community is the youngest religion demographic globally. They are very young in age. A lot of Muslims, they are very young in America and outside the United States as well. And that's the reason for them that they youth is settled, they get married, they get children, the number of children they produce is high. So simply, as some of them said, it's called a youth blood. There's a large number of youth accepting this religion. And as I said, it's the youngest median age of all faith-based community. So as they settle down and they start family, they start growing. So that leads me to something very interesting, which is I found that the researchers said, if we adopt 100% ban on Muslims to migrate to the United States, how this will change the future of America. As we all know, suggestions we have heard discussed in the media over the last year due to the election cycle, that some people suggested to ban Muslims from entering the United States. Should such a 100% ban on Muslim entering the United States be enacted, will change the future of 2050? What will happen? The Pew Research Center telling us that it will only reduce the number of American Muslims by a single-digit percentage. So in 2050, America will be made of 430 million people. And the percentage of Muslim, if we don't have basically this law in place, will be 2.4%. That's it. But if you put a 100% ban on Muslims coming to America, the Muslim percentage will be by that time 1.4%. That's one only digit. So that scary tactic that some people saying by, oh, they're going to come and migrate and change the whole country, actually, numbers don't support that theory at all. And if you keep that, by the way, the Pew Research said, if you keep that enacted law that preventing any Muslim from walking to the United States from now all the way to 2050, from now all the way to 2050, can you imagine that? It will not make any change but just 1%. That's the only change we'll make. So why, I'm not going to answer the why, I'll leave for you. But another also issue that raised, like another issue that we always hear in the news about the future of demography. It's about Western country. We hear a lot of alarmist rhetoric in the far right press about immigrants flooding the Western nations, and especially in the case of Europe, like England, France, Netherlands, and we're saying, you know what, immigrants have changed the face of this country, have not made them European anymore. We don't want to be another France, we don't want to be another Netherlands, we don't want to be this or that. And, these countries used to be a Christian country, not anymore. It's all immigrants' country. The truth, according to professional demographer, again, is just as the unaffiliated number rise in the United States, it's rise in these countries in much faster rate than the United States. And that's the main reason why these countries are not Christian countries anymore. Because the people who identify themselves as unaffiliated is way, way more than any number you can imagine here. It's not due to the immigration. It's not due to immigrants flooding this country. So, is it a clash of civilization, or it's a clash of culture due to identity polarization? As American anxiety over the rise of ISIS in the Middle East was peaking at 2015, a survey was done by Lifeway Research found that 27% of America's 320 million people believe that ISIS represent the true Islam, the true message of Islam. So 27%. The highest demographic rate that believed ISIS presented the Islamic religion were senior Protestant evangelical pastors as the rate of 45% from those people. But what's so ironic, I found in the research that published by Lifeway, that they said the majority of African American pastors who from the same denomination, evangelical as well, they wouldn't believe that. They will believe that Islam only will present a peaceful society. So in short, we have a racial divided amongst Protestant evangelical pastors in their view of Islamic religion. While 53% majority of African American pastors believe that Islam produces a peaceful society, 61% of white Protestant evangelical pastors disagree and promote otherwise. That a plurality of American lay people, 43% agree with the African American view that Islam only produces a peaceful society or a peaceful society. So what such polls show basically is that there's among white evangelical more receptive to this idea that ISIS is the true representative of Islam, or Islam lead to a violence and hostile society, while other people don't see it this way, like African American and the rest of America. during the same month that this research was published, in the same year, in February 2015, ISIS published something very interesting. They published in their magazine Dawah an article, and the point of the whole issue that month in February was about something they call it eliminating the gray zone, the gray area. What's mean by the gray area or the gray zone? It is the area where allows Muslim and non-Muslims, other faith-based community, and people with no faith to live together in harmony. So they said you have the black and white, and you have the two extreme, but in the middle there is an area where most of people live in harmony, can live together. So ISIS' goal is to eliminate that gray zone, to make sure that any society out there in the world will be divided among themselves, polarized to two camps, that they basically believe that the existence of one means the end of the other one, because that's how they see the world. And that's the whole message of ISIS and that message. And so while many people, wise people in America, from non-Muslim community and Muslim community leaders like myself are out there telling the people that ISIS actions are un-Islamic and earning death sentence from ISIS for challenging them, we have some of our fellow Americans, unfortunately, among white evangelical, are basically targeting us and undercutting us by reinforcing ISIS' message of and worldview. In conclusion, so I don't keep this long, there are political forces within our country and overseas who are trying their best to exploit our anxiety accompanying the seismic demographic change underway out to 2050. The best response, in my opinion, to extremism for both ends is for all of us to expand the cooperation between communities. So building out from the center, as the extreme continue trying to paralyze the society. The Bible teaches us, bless the peacemaker, Matthew 5, verse 9. And our model as Muslims, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, taught us in a very famous incident all Muslims almost familiar with it, called Hilf al-Fudul, which is a treaty that he made, ﷺ, and he was part of it. And in that treaty, he basically represented something very, very fundamental in our religion, which is holding equal justice for all. That's what this whole treaty was all about. That's why ISIS, in my opinion, targeted me for my life's work, being a bridge builder across the gray zone that they wish to eliminate from our society. God bless you all. Thank you very much. Oh, yes.
I don't normally like to read someone's bio in its entirety, but I've known Patricia Villafranca for over 10 years, and there's things in here I didn't know that are impressive, and I think that everybody should understand before she speaks. Retired Special Agent Patricia Villafranca, and retired is very important because some people are former agents. Maybe they spent a month, maybe they spent 2 years with the FBI. Patricia spent over 28 years, and she retired in good graces with the Bureau. She's been assigned to the New York, Boston, and Houston FBI field offices. At the time of her retirement, she served as the Congressional Affairs and Community Outreach Coordinator for the Houston Division of the FBI, working on a myriad of civic, business, and with civic and business and cultural organizations to create an environment in which law enforcement and the community collaborated and communicated effectively. Under her leadership, the FBI Outreach Office dramatically increased its efforts for public education and work with community leaders to confront and mitigate threats such as human trafficking, gang violence, terrorism, and economic espionage. Prior to this assignment, She was assigned to the FBI Houston's Joint Terrorism Task Force as part of the Counter Terrorism Intelligence Group, which is comprised of local, state, federal law enforcement agencies who provided high-quality training and intelligence sharing services to small and medium-sized police departments in a 40-county area surrounding Houston. And to give that some context, the Houston area, Greater Houston area, has more people in it than the entire state of Tennessee. In 2004, the members of this intelligence working group were recognized by then-Director, FBI Director Robert Mueller, with the prestigious FBI Director's Award for Excellence in Service to the law enforcement community. For over a dozen years during her career, Patricia was the leader in the FBI's evidence response team and serving in Boston and Houston as part of a highly trained FBI team that responded to violent crime scenes nationally and internationally. As part of this, in her role, she investigated the bombings in the Israeli embassy in Buenos Aires, Argentina, the bombing in Saudi Arabia's National Guard and U.S. Air Force facility in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, the killings of young boys in the sugarcane fields in Colombia, the actual assassination of presidential candidate Luis Donaldo Colosio in Mexico. Her Spanish is better than mine. And she traveled frequently to provide hands-on training and crime scene investigation training to officers in Paraguay, Chile, Turkey, El Salvador, Costa Rica, and Mexico. Please welcome Patricia Villafranca.
Thank you so much for having me here. Waleed and I thought we would escape the Texas heat and come to Nashville, but it didn't work out that way. But we're still really happy to be here. I wouldn't have enjoyed my job at the FBI in the outreach portions if it weren't for people like Waleed and Isa. And it was so great to meet the chief tonight and meet his outreach people here to know that this is a city where you don't even need to hear about why it's important for law enforcement and the communities to come together, because you're all over it. There are other communities where until buildings are on fire, nobody's talking to each other, and that's a really, really bad time to try to build a relationship with someone. But it seems that here in Nashville, you are way ahead of the curve. So I told Isa I would start with a little riddle for you all, because this is one of my pet peeves. And I'm going to try to stick a little bit with the theme of marginalizing extremism or marginalizing radicals. Afterwards, I'll take questions. I'm sure Waleed too. We'll take questions on things that go off topic, but I'm going to try to stick with that. But one of my pet peeves is what's the difference between an extremist and a terrorist? Does anybody know? Exactly, and that's the true meaning of those words. But if you watch the news, an extremist is a white guy and a terrorist is a Muslim guy or gal. And that just, I've been trained by the FBI, but I've also done extensive training with the Anti-Defamation League. They keep, as I'm sure you know, they keep marvelous statistics on hate speech and extremism that affects all different groups. And, they're one of the organizations I worked the most closely with. And we were trained by their experts and by the FBI's that an extremist is someone who has beliefs that are far out on the edges of what society would consider normal or acceptable. And extremism is a description of what you believe. Terrorism is a description of an act that you have taken. You have actually purchased a weapon or conducted a surveillance on a place. Where terrorism is an action and extremism is just a thought process. Extremism is not illegal. You can believe anything you want to believe if you're not taking overt actions to hurt someone who disagrees with you. Versus terrorism, our definition is someone who is willing to utilize force, violence, or threat of force and violence in order to achieve a political or ideological gain for your side. So the shooter at the movie theater in Colorado, was he an extremist, a terrorist? I think he was neither. I think he was a insane person. But so when the media called him, mentally disturbed, okay, that's fine. Our couple in San Bernardino, California, okay, they're terrorists. The media called them terrorists, and I would agree with that definition. But what about the white male from Charleston, South Carolina, who planned and became radicalized, planned an attack, accumulated the weapons that he needed, chose his target, went in and slaughtered people to further the ends of his belief? What is he? He's a terrorist. But if you talk to the media, he's an extremist. And I just don't understand that. I don't like the language. I don't like the language of the current, political debate. Language can matter. It can matter very much. And so I thought, well, before we even start, let's get clear. In my mind, radicalization is not illegal. And I've had many conversations with Shaykh Waleed about that. A young person can be going down a road that worries everyone around them, but as long as it's just what they believe and not what they do, I can't, nor should I can't lock them up. This is where the community comes into play. So we had an exercise in Houston with the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, the Sheriff Garcia, who's no longer sheriff, but at the time, and we invited people from all the different ethnic and religious communities of Houston, but particularly from the Muslim community, because this was during the time when ISIS was putting out those videos, and we had a lot of young people trying to get airplane tickets to Turkey, and we said, let's have a conversation about this, and we threw out some scenarios about, here's a young man who had all straight A's, and now all of a sudden his grades are dropping, and he's not coming home at the time that he said he would come home, and he's starting to go online, and he's starting to listen to some things that that ISIS was putting out there, and it's starting to come into his speech a little bit. And we stopped it all along the way and said, whose problem is this right now? Who's the person that should step up and take a role in looking at this young man and doing something to either help him or stop him, whatever? And it was really interesting. We got very, very far down the line of things that were happening before anyone felt that it was an appropriate time for law enforcement. First it was his family. This is an issue for his family, his parents and his older brother, to talk to him about his failing grades. And then some disruptions at school. Now, this is a role for the guidance counselor or, a favorite teacher. And then it goes on that this is maybe a role for a faith leader. And it wasn't until way down the line that we got to the point where this is actually an appropriate place for law enforcement to come in. So I'm nosy. I had to ask. I had been trying to make relationships in all of Houston's different communities with the right people, the people whose hearts were in the right place, the people who weren't trying to be the gatekeeper between their, if you want to get to the Korean community, you must go through me. I tried to avoid those people and just get to know who's out there really changing our community, who's feeding the homeless, who's doing from these communities. That's who I want to meet. But so as we went through this scenario of this young man and his behavior that was causing more and more of a concern, we asked, all right, if you got to this stage, we all have agreed that it's already, we know it's his family's issue, and we've all sort of agreed that by now it's actually gotten to where the school might get involved, and now we're into that, where even the school can't quite handle, he's missing from school a lot, and a lot of people said, well, we think this would be the time for, because it was an ISIS scenario, we would try to reach out to someone who was knowledgeable in our community who could help us. And I said, who would you call? This is from my own curiosity. And there were 100 people at that exercise. I got 2 answers. And I asked in small groups, Shaykh Waleed, Paul Galloway. Those are the only 2 answers I got all day long. None of the other people that tried to be big shots in the community and always have those were, and I knew then that these are the right partnerships. These are the right people, because, the people who, without being paid, without being asked, from their heart said, these are the people I would trust if I got to a point such as that one. So yesterday when I flew in, Paul had me go and speak to educators. We had one of the members of your school board, it was on the news last night, very briefly, covered absolutely incorrectly, but that doesn't surprise me at all. I told the reporter, lovely gal, I said, we're here to explain to teachers that there is no profile by which you can spot your school shooter, which is an area that I specialized in as an agent. And Paul said, hey, if you're coming to Nashville, I'm not going to let the opportunity pass. I want to have you give a presentation to as many educators as I can get. So, of course, the story on the news is local teachers learn how to spot a school shooter. But at least they gave the credit to your organization for offering this. I mean, you know, if you want people to really get to know you, one of the first things you can do is show what a good neighbor you are. And, you know, here he said, you know, our organization is bringing Pat here for our own purposes, but while she's here, I've talked all around the world about the school shooter phenomenon, so I talked to this group. And I didn't even intend to include anything about school shooters in my comments with you today, but the front page of my PowerPoint, the front slide, was a picture of Mr. Cho, the student at Virginia Tech that committed that horrible mass shooting. And he's wearing a black T-shirt, and he's got his head almost shaved, and he's growling like he's real angry. Have you seen those pictures? He mailed those pictures to NBC News. First he went into the dorm and killed that young couple, remember? Then he went back to his apartment, changed his clothes, threw his hard drive in the pond, which was never found, and he went to the post office and he mailed to NBC News all these pictures of himself that he took. It was the image he chose. Here he is, he's dead, he's killed all these people, and now what's coming out on the news but these pictures that create a persona of his desire and create. He was not, and if you'll pardon my French, I say he looked like a ninja badass. Okay, doesn't he? Tough guy. You'll be sorry you messed with me. You know, I'll show you I'm powerful, I'm scary, I'm going to get even with all of you for what you've done. And that is the image that went all over the country. Everybody saw it. I thought, how many disaffected, you know, kids see that and think it's appealing? Look what he showed them. He's a tough guy. We should have marginalized him rather than, you know, put this persona of him. He wasn't a tough guy. He wasn't a ninja. He was a pathetic, kind of a loser kind of guy. He never had a girlfriend. He didn't have any friends. He was socially awkward. He didn't fit. And yet all of the young people who heard what he did see this image of him, of his own creation, and our media perpetuated it over and over again. And it occurred to me that's exactly what ISIS is doing. They create their own videos. They have the lighting just the way they want it. They wear their clothing and their hair just the way they want it. The messages, and then it just, you know, the news, if ISIS sends a video to the news of them doing some horrific thing, it's going to get aired. And they're in control, and they look, it affects, you know, disaffected young people like that. Boy, I wish I was a badass. I wish people would be afraid to mess with me. I'd show them. I was telling Paul, I think we ought to go figure out who these guys are, find their really dorky, awkward high school yearbook picture, and put it out there rather than these photos of their own creation, this image of their own creation. But I haven't had any luck in my attempts to try to get the media to be more fair, more accurate in their language, and particularly when it comes to the way they portray the Muslim community. I was an FBI agent, field agent, out on the street working cases for 20 plus years when they pulled me to become the community outreach coordinator. That is not a job that the FBI usually gives to an agent. I'm sad to say they usually give it to a retired lady from Wells Fargo Bank who was in charge of customer relations, and then they bring her over and call her a community outreach specialist, and then they send her out to the Korean community or the Pakistani community, and she says, here I am, I'm your envoy. And then somebody says, hey, you know, my uncle's getting threatening phone calls, what should I do? And she, I don't know. You know, could you talk to us a little bit about, you know, J. Edgar Hoover and some of his, you know, radical beliefs? Well, I don't know anything about. I have no institutional knowledge of the FBI, and I have no law enforcement background, and they're well-meaning people, but I was the first person in the whole FBI that came from an investigative and intelligence background and got sent out to do outreach. And it was a very strange experience at first, but it was the best 8 to 10 years that I ever had. It's the only thing I miss now that I'm retired. I don't miss the commute, I don't miss the bureaucracy, but I miss being out in, like, I envy you all that's I was out in a different community every day. And the Muslim community in particular was really hungry for a relationship that wasn't centered always on terrorism. The first time I met with the community, Paul was there. It was mostly young males from the community who were very active with youth groups. And we sat down and I said, look, if you go to the Irish community or if you go to the Polish community and ask a 10-year-old, what do you know about the FBI? They're going to say, oh, they came to our career day. And, oh, yeah, they came and talked to us about internet safety. And that's, probably about it. And I said, we should be getting the same answer from your community. These children should have a chance to get to know us and other law enforcement agencies the same way that they do everywhere else. But I said, but I can't invite myself. It means nothing. So I challenge you to give me the opportunity to develop a relationship on a very normal level that has nothing to do with the problems, and then we'll see where we go from there. And it just took off. It just took off from there. And so Paul and I decided we were going to collaborate on something. And he was working with a program called iLead. It's all interfaith, pretty high-end kids, pretty sharp, top of their class kind of kids from 10 different faith communities. And we had no script. We had no idea what we wanted to do. And I'm thinking, how awkward, what the heck would people, why is the FBI getting involved in a interfaith youth group summer program? Why would we even be there, and how could we do something that would be appropriate? Well, one of the things, it's in the national security interest that kids of all different faiths and religions learn how to sit down next to each other, talk to each other, understand each other. And so any program that fosters people in the community getting along is a great thing for our nation. So we decided to do, and I'm into forensics. I was the crime scene geek for all those years. So we created a scenario in which pieces of scripture disappeared. And there were footprints leading away from each piece of scripture, and there were fingerprints near each one. And we had the kids, they dusted for prints, they lifted the prints, they poured molds and poured the footprints and brought in their molds. And then we had the faith leaders come in, and they took their fingerprints and they took their shoe prints, and they figured out that it was the imam who took the Torah scripture, and it was the Presbyterian priest who took the Zoroastrian scripture. And why? Because it looked so similar to their own scripture that they thought it was theirs. And it was so much fun, and we had a ball. And those are the kinds of programs that have to happen all over our communities, and not just about, the Muslim community. It's about everybody. But as I got to know the Muslim community in particular, they were just, God, we can't catch a break in the media. They say, every Muslim is a terrorist. The only news on TV is about what's going on with ISIS. And so a reporter from our local CBS affiliate said, I would like to do a story on the good relationship that the FBI Houston has with the Houston Muslim community. And it really is, it's actually such a good relationship that the State Department brought over a delegation from Germany and a delegation from Finland to come over and learn about how NGOs and law enforcement and the community of Houston work together to fight extremism and hate crimes. But anyway, so I was so happy to do the story. And I covered some media issues. I was there for the whole filming. That reporter was with our terrorism boss, Steve Gentry, for at least 45 minutes, and I was in the room the entire time. And Steve said, well, we as a nation face some threats that seem to be coming, out of, this area in Syria where, there's no law and order. And this is the kinds of relationships we have where we're all working together. Guess what the story was? Lead story on the news. Steve talking about the threat we face, never mentioning once how wonderful the community had been and how closely we worked together. And so when I hear people, and I hear it every day, I heard it when Paul was in the round table, when the sheriff from a different county said, Muslims never say that these acts are bad. They don't denounce them. Are you kidding me? We give you every opportunity to hear that. You could stand on the top of the Empire State Building and scream out that you denounce it. It's not going to get on the news. I'm going to tell you right now. I told a group that I spoke with last week that I was coming here to Vanderbilt, and I said, you won't hear a thing about it. It's supposed to be a conversation on how do we marginalize radicalization and how do we all work together. And I said, unless somebody comes in and does something violent or divisive or despicable, and then you will hear about it. But if it's a success, and if people actually talk, and if the community actually learns something, and you won't hear anything about it. So I don't know how you fix that problem. I really don't, except for just creating your own material. We've been wanting in Houston to have a video contest about not being a hater for all the youth groups from all the churches, Christian, Jewish, Zoroastrian, and then have the winning videos shown at like the Houston Rodeo and the NBA. We always have the All-Star game. We've got the Super Bowl coming up. We're trying to get that going, where maybe if there was some good content out there, people would click on it and these other better messages and more positive messages would get out. So, all right, I talked about that. All right. Now I lost my track. I want to just wrap up. The rhetoric going on in this current political situation just couldn't be more harmful. The gray area, it's going to tie right back in. You talked about ISIS has this totalitarian, utopian vision that's absolutely impossible to achieve. And I would say it almost sounds like Donald Trump has one too. He's going to deport everybody that he doesn't want, and he's going to create this society where we're all, and that's also impossible. It's not going to happen. They're never going to be able to deport everyone, and they're never going to be able to do these things. And the divisiveness is unbelievable. The language is getting worse instead of better. I find that 17 people ran to be the Republican nominee, and anyone who was reasonable and measured in their rhetoric was the first ones out. Did you notice that? That it just, I've never seen anything like it. I told everyone, this is never going to happen. Oh, don't even worry about it. It's just not going to happen. But the more reasonable and the more measured you were about your words, the more likely you were to drop out at the very beginning. And I'm worried for our society. Radicalization is not just a problem in the Muslim community, and I think a lot of people don't understand that. Where's Balil? Who's going to the prisons? Where are you? There you are. It's not just the Muslim community that has issues with radicalization in the prisons. That's where the KKK gets all their new members. That's where the MS-13 gets all their new members. I think when we think of radicalization, we want to pinpoint it on just one community, when the truth is a lot of our young people are becoming radicalized in many different ways, to only think about their own group, to be suspicious and hateful of everybody who's outside of their group, to not even want to affiliate with people outside of their own group. I'm in a very multi-ethnic town in Texas, multi-ethnic, there's black, white, and Hispanic. That's it. There's nobody who's not Christian. It's all just black, white, and Hispanic. But if you go to the lunchroom, all the black kids are sitting together. All the white kids are sitting together, and all the Hispanic. Now, my kids are both, because my husband's Mexican, and I'm like, where are my kids going to sit? And you know what they told me? And this was, if they're rich, they'll sit with the white kids. If they're poor, they'll sit with the Mexican kids. They all know. Everybody knows the pecking order, and I'm just worried. I heard an interview on NPR the other day about Black Lives Matter movement, and they were interviewing some different activists from that community. And a woman said, well, let's not forget that black women's lives matter, because the Black Lives Matter tends to be very male-oriented. And then someone else chimed in, but, well, wait a minute, what about our transgender black lives? They're not really, and I thought, we are fragmenting down to the smallest little groupings. And so just to wrap up, today I went to hear Shaykh Waleed at the mosque do his Friday sermon, and it was wonderful. And they said, everyone stand together closely so that your shoulders touch. And they told me so that there's no room for the devil. And I said, my God, that's what we need to do as a society, is stand shoulder to shoulder so there's no room for ISIS and there's no room for the KKK. And we're not doing that. And people like the ones who have been honored here tonight, they're such heroes to me, because they're the only ones that are trying to push the wind and steer us in the right direction. So I'll just wrap up there.